9 people gathered for one desperate purpose: to save Whitney Houston's life. Her mentor, Clive Davis, her best friend, Robyn Crawford, her brothers, her pastor. And sitting across from Whitney, stern and unyielding, was her mother, Sissy Houston. What happened over 4 brutal hours would not save Whitney. Instead, it would drive a wedge between mother and daughter so deep it would never heal. Because when Whitney literally begged Sissy not to abandon her, Sissy Houston stood up and said 6 words that would haunt them both forever. "You don't deserve my help anymore." Then she walked out, and everything changed. By fall 1999, Whitney Houston's drug use was no longer rumor. It was crisis. The woman who had sold over 200 million records, who possessed what critics called a gift from God, was destroying herself with alarming speed. The signs had been building for years. In 1996, Whitney married Bobby Brown despite Sissy's vocal opposition. Bobby came from a harder background, had his own substance abuse struggles, and represented everything Sissy feared. By 1999, their relationship had reached critical mass. Whitney's behavior at public events had become increasingly erratic: canceled concerts, recording sessions missed, dramatic weight fluctuations. Those closest to her knew. Whitney was using cocaine and marijuana daily, sometimes with alcohol and prescription pills. But it was October 1999 that forced everyone's hand. Whitney was scheduled to perform at a Clive Davis charity gala at Carnegie Hall. Prestigious event, $1,000 tickets, New York's elite in attendance. Whitney was supposed to perform 3 songs. She never showed up. Not to sound check, not to rehearsal, not to the performance. Clive Davis, who had discovered Whitney as a teenager, who had shaped her into a global superstar, found himself making excuses to disappointed donors while frantically trying to reach her. When they finally located her 12 hours later, she was in her New Jersey mansion, incoherent and barely able to speak. The combination of drugs could have killed her. It was the closest she'd come to a fatal overdose, and it terrified everyone. That's when Clive decided to organize an intervention. Subtle approaches hadn't worked. Gentle conversations failed. Offers of help were always refused. Now it was time for something more confrontational. Time to force Whitney to face reality. And most importantly, time to get Sissy Houston involved. Because if anyone could reach Whitney, it would be her mother. The intervention was scheduled for November 14th, 1999, at the Four Seasons. Neutral territory where Whitney couldn't simply walk away. Clive Davis hired Dr. Patricia Morrison, one of the country's leading addiction specialists, to facilitate. The guest list was carefully curated. Clive Davis, Robyn Crawford, Whitney's brothers Gary and Michael, her pastor Reverend Carlton Brown, vocal coach Linda Gonzalez, tour manager Martin Jackson, Dr. Morrison, and Sissy Houston. Getting Sissy to agree was its own challenge. By 1999, their relationship was strained to breaking point. They spoke infrequently, conversations often ending in arguments. When Clive called requesting her participation, Sissy was initially resistant. "I've tried talking to her," Sissy said, voice tight with frustration. "She doesn't listen to me. What makes you think an intervention will be different?" But Clive was persistent. "Sissy, you're her mother. Whether Whitney admits it or not, she still needs you." After several conversations, Sissy agreed, though she made her position clear. "I'll come, but I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Tough love, that's the only thing that might get through to her." Nobody understood just how tough that love would become. Whitney was told she was meeting Clive for lunch to discuss her next album. A deception, but necessary. Martin Jackson picked her up from New Jersey at 11:30 a.m. Later, Martin described Whitney's demeanor as fragile but functional. Clearly using, movements slightly uncoordinated, speech occasionally slurred. But coherent enough to talk about music, about recording a gospel album with her mother, about Bobby and their daughter Bobby Christina. When they arrived at 12:45 p.m., Martin led Whitney to a private suite on the 18th floor. The moment Whitney walked through the door and saw the assembled group in a semicircle, her entire body language changed. Face hardened, hands clenched. And when she saw Sissy sitting there, expression stern and unyielding, something in Whitney's eyes went dark. "What is this?" Whitney asked, voice sharp with betrayal. "What the hell is this?" Dr. Morrison stood calmly. "Whitney, everyone here loves you and cares about you. We've asked you here because we're worried and want to help you get the treatment you need." Whitney's response was immediate. "Treatment? This is bullshit. This is an ambush." She turned to leave, but Martin blocked the door. Whitney spun back, eyes finding Clive Davis. "You did this," she said, voice dripping with hurt. "You lied to me. How could you do this to me?" The intervention had begun, and it was already going badly. What followed was 4 hours of the most emotionally brutal confrontation that any of the participants would ever experience. Dr. Morrison had instructed everyone to come prepared with specific examples of how Whitney's addiction had affected them, concrete incidents that would make it impossible for Whitney to deny the severity of her problem. Robyn Crawford went first. She spoke about the times she had found Whitney unconscious in hotel bathrooms, about the concerts where Whitney was so high she couldn't remember the words to her own songs, about the morning 3 weeks earlier when Whitney had called her at 4:00 a.m., paranoid and hallucinating, convinced that people were trying to break into her house. "I've loved you since we were teenagers," Robyn said, tears streaming down her face. "I've stood by you through everything. But Whitney, I can't watch you kill yourself anymore. I can't be the person who finds your body when this finally goes too far." Whitney's response was defensive and angry. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. You don't know what it's like to have the whole world watching you, judging you, waiting for you to fail. I use because it's the only way I can cope with all of it." Gary, Whitney's half-brother, spoke next. He talked about their mother's disappointment, about how Sissy cried herself to sleep worrying about Whitney, about the reputation Whitney was destroying not just for herself, but for the entire Houston family. His words were harsh, uncompromising, and they clearly wounded Whitney deeply. One by one, the others shared their prepared statements. Her pastor talked about how Whitney had stopped coming to church, how she had abandoned the gospel roots that had shaped her voice and her identity. Linda Gonzalez, her vocal coach, played a recording of Whitney singing in 1985, and then a recording from a recent performance. The difference in vocal quality so stark that it was painful to hear. "That's what drugs are doing to your voice," Linda said quietly. "They're destroying the gift God gave you." Through it all, Whitney alternated between rage, denial, tears, and cold silence. She accused them of being jealous of her success, of not understanding the demands of her career, of judging her when they all had their own problems. She was like a cornered animal, lashing out at everyone who tried to help her. But through the first 2 hours of the intervention, Sissy Houston hadn't said a word. She sat in her chair, her face impassive, watching her daughter unravel with an expression that gave nothing away. Several times, Dr. Morrison asked if Sissy wanted to speak, but Sissy simply shook her head. She was waiting. It was Clive Davis who finally broke through Whitney's defenses, at least temporarily. Clive had been more than a record executive to Whitney. He had been a mentor, a father figure, someone who had believed in her talent when she was just a church singer with big dreams. When he spoke, it was with visible emotion. "Whitney, I discovered you when you were 19 years old. I heard your voice and I absolutely knew that you were going to be one of the greatest singers in the history of popular music. And you were. You are. But baby, you're throwing it all away. The voice, the career, the respect, your health, maybe even your life. I can't sit by and watch that happen. I won't." For the first time, Whitney's defensive wall seemed to crack. She looked at Clive with something approaching vulnerability. "I know I have a problem," she said quietly. "I know I need help, but I'm scared. I'm so scared of what people will say, of what it will do to my career, of failing at this like I've failed at everything else." It was a moment of genuine honesty, a moment when breakthrough seemed possible. Dr. Morrison immediately moved to capitalize on it, explaining the treatment program they had researched, a high-end facility in Arizona that specialized in celebrity clients, where Whitney could get help in complete privacy and confidentiality. "You won't be alone," Dr. Morrison said. "We'll all support you through this. Your family, your friends, everyone here. But Whitney, you have to want this. You have to commit to the treatment and do the work." Whitney was nodding slowly, tears running down her face. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, maybe you're right. Maybe I need to do this." That's when Sissy Houston finally spoke, and everything fell apart. Sissy's voice cut through the room like a knife. Maybe you need to do this. There was no warmth in her tone, no motherly compassion, just cold, hard judgment. "Whitney, there is no maybe. You are an addict. You are destroying yourself and embarrassing this family. And you have been lying to everyone, including yourself, for years." Whitney's head snapped up, and the vulnerability that had been visible just moments before vanished, replaced by pure defensive rage. "Embarrassing the family? That's what you care about. Not me, not whether I'm okay, but the family reputation." Sissy continued, her voice rising. "I warned you about Bobby Brown. I told you he would drag you down to his level. I told you that the secular music world would corrupt you. I told you that leaving gospel music was a mistake. But you didn't listen. You never listen. And now look at you. You're exactly what I was afraid you'd become." The room went completely silent. Several people looked shocked at Sissy's harsh words. Dr. Morrison tried to intervene. "Sissy, perhaps we could." But Sissy wasn't finished. "I have spent your entire life trying to give you everything. I gave you the gift of music. I taught you to sing. I introduced you to the right people. I sacrificed my own career to support yours. And this is how you repay me, by throwing it all away on drugs and that man you married." Whitney stood up, her whole body shaking. "You gave me the gift of music. You didn't give me anything, Mama. You took everything from me. You took my childhood. You took my freedom. You made me your little performing puppet, and when I finally tried to live my own life, you punished me for it." "Your own life," Sissy shot back. "Is this the life you wanted? Smoking crack in your bathroom while your daughter is in the next room, missing concerts because you're too high to stand up, destroying the voice that God gave you. This is the life you chose." The cruelty of those words, the complete absence of empathy or understanding, shocked everyone in the room. Robyn Crawford would later say, "I had never heard a mother speak to her child that way. It was like Sissy wanted to hurt her, wanted to make her feel as small and worthless as possible." Whitney's response was volcanic. "At least I chose something. At least I tried to be my own person instead of living my whole life terrified of what people would think. You know what your problem is, Mama? You never loved me. You loved what I could do. You loved my voice, my success, my ability to make you look good. But you never loved me, just me, Whitney, the person." "That's not true," Sissy said, but her voice wavered slightly for the first time. "Yes, it is." Whitney was screaming now, years of pain and resentment pouring out. "Every time I tried to be anything other than your perfect little gospel princess, you rejected me. When I wanted to sing pop music, you said I was betraying God. When I fell in love with Bobby, you said he wasn't good enough. Nothing I ever did was good enough for you unless it matched your vision of what I should be." Sissy stood up, her face flushed with anger. "I had a vision for you because I saw your potential. I saw what you could become. And instead, you chose this. You chose drugs and a man who uses you and a life that's destroying you from the inside out. You're right about one thing, Whitney. I am disappointed. I am ashamed, because you were supposed to be better than this." The words hung in the air like poison. Ashamed. Sissy Houston was ashamed of her daughter. Whitney's face crumpled. When she spoke again, her voice was small, broken. "I needed you, Mama. When this all started getting too hard, when the pressure got too much, when I started using because I didn't know any other way to cope, I needed you. And you weren't there. You were never there unless it was to criticize me or tell me what I was doing wrong." For just a moment, something flickered in Sissy's expression. Something that might have been regret or recognition. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the stern righteousness that had defined her approach to parenting for Whitney's entire life. "I won't apologize for having standards," Sissy said coldly. "I won't apologize for expecting you to be the woman I raised you to be. And I certainly won't apologize for refusing to enable your self-destructive behavior by coddling you and pretending everything is fine when it clearly isn't." Whitney took a step toward her mother, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Mama, please, please don't do this. I'm asking you, I'm begging you, please help me. I can't do this alone. I need my mother." It was the most vulnerable moment anyone had ever seen from Whitney Houston. The superstar facade was completely gone. She was just a hurting woman asking her mother for help. Everyone in that room held their breath, waiting to see if Sissy would soften, if maternal instinct would override pride and anger. Instead, Sissy Houston picked up her purse and coat. "You don't deserve my help anymore," she said, her voice flat and final. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. When you're ready to get serious about changing your life, when you're ready to actually listen instead of making excuses, call me. Until then, I'm done." Whitney lunged forward, grabbing her mother's arm. "Mama, don't go. Please don't leave me. I'm sorry, I'll do better. I'll go to treatment. I'll do whatever you want, just please don't walk out on me." Sissy pulled her arm free. "You should have thought about that before you threw your life away." Then she walked to the door, opened it, and left without looking back. The sound of that door closing was like a gunshot. Whitney stood frozen for a moment, staring at the closed door as if she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Then she collapsed to the floor, her sobs so deep and wrenching that they seemed to come from someplace beyond human grief. Robyn Crawford rushed to her side, holding her as she cried. But Whitney was inconsolable. She kept repeating the same words over and over. "She left me. My mama left me. She left me." The intervention was over, and it had accomplished exactly the opposite of what it was meant to do. In the weeks and months following the failed intervention, Whitney Houston's downward spiral accelerated dramatically. She refused all offers of treatment, cut off contact with most of the people who had been in that hotel room, and her drug use intensified. Those close to her said she seemed to have given up, as if Sissy's abandonment had confirmed her worst beliefs about herself. Bobby Brown, who had not been at the intervention, became Whitney's primary support system and enabler. Their relationship, already troubled, became increasingly toxic as they used drugs together and isolated themselves from anyone who tried to help. The mansion in New Jersey became a fortress where the couple spiraled deeper into addiction, with only a small circle of hangers-on and enablers allowed inside. Sissy Houston, for her part, maintained her position. She told friends and family that she had done what needed to be done, that tough love was the only approach that might eventually work, that Whitney needed to hit rock bottom before she would be ready to accept help. "I refuse to watch her destroy herself," Sissy said repeatedly. "When she's ready to get serious about recovery, I'll be there. But I won't enable her by pretending this is acceptable." But privately, those close to Sissy said she was devastated. She would sit in her New Jersey home, surrounded by photographs of young Whitney, and cry for hours. She would replay the intervention in her mind, questioning whether she had been too harsh, wondering if walking out had been the right decision. But her pride wouldn't allow her to reach out, to admit that maybe she had made a mistake, to bridge the gap that had opened between them. The distance between mother and daughter would last for nearly 2 years. They didn't speak at all for the first 6 months. When they finally did reconnect, it was brief, superficial conversations that avoided all mention of the intervention or Whitney's continued drug use. The deep wound that had been opened that day at the Four Seasons never fully healed. In 2002, during the infamous Diane Sawyer interview, Whitney was asked about her relationship with her mother. Her response was telling. "My mother and I have a complicated relationship," Whitney said carefully. "She loves me in her way, but sometimes love isn't enough if it comes with too many conditions attached." Sissy, watching the interview from her living room, felt each word like a physical blow. But she still couldn't bring herself to pick up the phone, to say the words that might have changed everything. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I should never have walked out on you when you needed me most." Years later, after Whitney's death in 2012, many of the people who had been in that hotel room would look back on the intervention as a crucial turning point, the moment when Whitney might have been saved, but instead was pushed further into the darkness. Dr. Patricia Morrison, the addiction specialist, would write in her memoir that the 1999 Whitney Houston intervention was one of her few complete failures, and that Sissy's behavior had been one of the most damaging examples of parental intervention she had ever witnessed. Robyn Crawford, in interviews after Whitney's death, was more direct. "That intervention destroyed Whitney. Sissy walking out confirmed every fear Whitney had about not being worthy of love, about being too damaged to deserve help. From that day forward, a part of Whitney just gave up." Clive Davis would say diplomatically that the intervention didn't go as planned, but that everyone involved had been trying to help. He never publicly criticized Sissy, but those close to him said he believed her approach had been catastrophically wrong. As for Sissy herself, she addressed the intervention obliquely in her 2013 memoir, Remembering Whitney. She wrote, I tried everything to help my daughter, including participating in interventions that I hoped would make her see reason. Sometimes I had to be tough because being soft wasn't working. Looking back, I have regrets about many things, but I never regretted trying to save her life, even when my methods were harsh. What Sissy never acknowledged publicly was the core truth that Whitney had screamed at her in that hotel room. That her love had always come with conditions, that she had loved Whitney's talent and success more than she had loved Whitney the person, and that when Whitney failed to meet her impossibly high standards, Sissy had withdrawn that love entirely. The tragedy of the 1999 intervention wasn't just that it failed to get Whitney into treatment. It was that it confirmed Whitney's deepest fear, the fear that had driven her to drugs in the first place. The fear that she was fundamentally unworthy of unconditional love. And when Sissy walked out of that room, she validated that fear in the most devastating way possible. In the end, both women were destroyed by the same force, the inability to see past their own pain and pride to give each other what they both desperately needed. Whitney needed a mother who would love her without judgment, who would hold her while she cried instead of lecturing her about shame and family reputation. Sissy needed a daughter who would vindicate all her sacrifices, who would fulfill the promise of greatness without the messy complications of addiction and poor choices. Neither of them got what they needed. And on November 14th, 1999, in a hotel suite in Manhattan, the last real chance to bridge that gap was lost forever when Sissy Houston chose judgment over mercy, pride over compassion, and tough love over the kind of unconditional acceptance that might actually have saved her daughter's life. The 6 words Sissy spoke as she walked out that door, "You don't deserve my help anymore," would echo through the remaining 12 years of Whitney's life. They would echo in every relapse, every failed attempt at recovery, every moment when Whitney felt too broken and unworthy to ask for help. And they would echo in Sissy's heart during those long years of estrangement, a constant reminder of the moment when she chose being right over being kind and lost her daughter in the process. This is the story of how love can destroy when it comes wrapped in conditions and demands. It's the story of how the people who hurt us most are often the ones who love us most, precisely because their love carries such weight and expectation. And it's ultimately the story of how a single moment, a single decision to walk away instead of stay, can alter the trajectory of a life forever.